Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I want to talk about something that I've been talking about quite a bit lately on how to become more prepared. And my opinion is kind of that ultimate level of preparedness is to be more self-sufficient. You know, you can only store up so much stuff. You can only have so many things put away, and putting away food and items and gear and stuff is all good, but that's really more of kind of a short-term preparedness. If you're looking for really long-term preparedness, considering all the things that's happening right now in the world and the long-term outlook that we need to be more prepared for, you know, whether it's long-term failures of different systems or just we people, us kind of like-minded folks needing to kind of let's just say secede a little bit more from the system, break apart from the system to kind of protect ourselves. The best way to really do that in the end is to become more self-sufficient, which is why I and many other prepper channels promote homesteading as a real viable means to become more self-sufficient. And so I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about some tips on becoming more self-sufficient. I believe everyone can do it, regardless of your situation. I understand everyone's situation is different, so it's going to be a different journey for you, a different timeline, all that kind of stuff. But I believe if you're serious about it and you work at it, then everyone can achieve some level of self-sufficiency. And I have some tips that I have written down to hopefully give you some ideas. I mean, there's no way I can just teach it to you, especially in one video, but maybe, just maybe, it'll spark some ideas in your head that can help you down that road. Because I just, aside from supernatural spiritual intervention, which, you know, I have faith in the Father that He will protect us. Here from you know, on this planet, I believe that our best bet for a true long-term survival and thriving and protecting our way of life and our family and our community is through becoming more self-sufficient. So I do want to get into this. Before I get started, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and clicking that like and subscribe button. Sharing this video if you feel so led to, that if you like it, that's really the best way to kind of get the word out and to overcome the YouTube algorithms that is liking this type of content less and less here lately. It's becoming more difficult to get people to watch these videos anymore, because YouTube is really doing their best to try to keep that from happening. So one thing I want to point out, for those of you that aren't at that level of homesteading self-sufficiency that you want to be, maybe you watch videos and you see these people, and there's some of these videos you can learn a lot from, but the thing that I have a problem with a lot of them is they show it as, you know, well, we're already living this wonderful, perfect lifestyle, and well, if you're not, then I guess you're not self-sufficient. And you're not living a sustainable lifestyle that is, you know, created with your own two hands. It's good to live that way if you're capable of it. But even if you're not at that level, you can still participate in working towards self-sufficiency. And even if you, for instance, maybe you're still attached to the grid and you want to be off-grid. It doesn't mean that you can't learn the skills and be able to be off-grid if something happens. So what I mean by that, you don't have to necessarily go out and purchase a $30,000, $40,000 solar system to say, well, now I'm off-grid, I'm good to go. Maybe you're still connected to the grid, but yet you have generator power, or you occasionally flip off all the utilities in your house and learn how to survive without them. So having the ability to do these things may not be as good as daily living this lifestyle, but it's certainly a way to train, a way to get yourself ready. So, you know, cooking over an open fire. Maybe you don't cook over an open fire or an old wood stove every day, but if you have one or have the ability to do that, do it occasionally at least, so that you're learning, you're honing those skills. Not everyone has to live in some rustic cabin far away in the mountains to be truly self-sufficient. Just having the ability to be self-sufficient when you have to is going down that path at least, and occasionally practicing those skills so that someday when you get to that point, you'll be ready. All right, number one is have energy alternatives. Your two main things for your energy is a heat source to heat in your house, and we've all learned all about that over the past couple of weeks with this, mini ice age that hit us for a couple of weeks, or at least most of the United States. So heat is very important, and electricity. A lot of people, I mentioned a $30,000-$40,000 solar system. If you're able to do that, that's great. Not everyone is. I know someone that now they're just one person, a single person, so that you have to take that in consideration. But they live completely off the grid. They have a solar system that powers everything that they need, and they have much less than $5,000. I think maybe around $3,500 to $4,000 in their solar system that they kind of piece together and put it together. Now you might ask, well, how in the world can they live on a solar system that small? Well, they've learned to do without a lot of things. They've drastically downsized a lot of things. The house that they built is small, and it's designed in a way that it doesn't need as much heating, it doesn't need as much cooling. So there are ways to do it without just writing out a big fat check and having a company come in and install everything for you. Building it a piece at a time is something that you can do. You definitely need to learn how to do it, but it's something you can do on your own. You do not have to be a professional. If you have a little bit of skills, a little bit of knowledge of electricity and how to wire things in, it is doable. I definitely recommend getting some advice, maybe having someone that you know that knows a little bit more, kind of looking over your shoulder, making sure you're doing it right. But it is possible to do. And it is possible to do it on a much smaller budget than just having some big system, dropped in so that you can say that you're, living off grid and not connected to the power grid. The best way to do that, though, is to learn to just do less. If you've got some brand new 30 cubic foot refrigerator, big old huge side by side that's, sucking up a bunch of electricity, you might need to downsize it and figure out other ways to refrigerate your food. Having a big, washer and dryer or dishwasher or big screen TVs, things that modern Americans just take for granted, that sucks up a lot of electricity. And so if you learn to do with less, downsize things, completely get rid of it, you can definitely use a smaller system to power a smaller house and cost a lot less money. Get out of debt as much as possible. You hear that all the time, but it is true. The less money that you have to pay out, the less money you need coming in to live off of. So do your best to get out from under things. It's very common nowadays. It's so different for those of you my age and older. Remember back when, number one, cars didn't cost that much. It didn't take as much to pay them off, but it was not uncommon for people to drive older vehicles. You drove them and you took care of them, and you got rid of that one and bought another older vehicle. Nowadays, it's just assumed that everyone's driving a brand new or very nearly new vehicle, that they're paying a house payment or more on just a car. Maybe that's just not the best idea, to have a brand new car that you're paying, hundreds of dollars a month in car payment and insurance. Figure out ways to get out of debt and to cut back. And the less money that you need, then the less money you're required to make. It's very simple. I've talked to people many times about moving to the Ozarks, and they're like, well, I live in such and such place, and I make $100,000 a year. Can I find a job way out there in the country making $100,000 a year? Probably not. You could probably find a job out here, especially if you're willing to drive a little bit, $30,000, $40,000, maybe even $50,000 a year. But you know what? You can live a lifestyle out here that you don't have to make $100,000 a year. So learning to get out of debt and learning to just live on less will definitely get you further down that road and that path, that journey to self-sufficiency. Decide where you're going to live. You need to nail it down. Maybe it's where you're at right now. Maybe you want to get out of the state that you're in. Maybe you want to get out of the city. Maybe you want to get to a place that the land is cheaper, that you can be more secluded. Maybe you have to be close enough to a hospital, or you need to be close to whatever it is, whatever your rules are, or whatever that you need and you want. You need to write that down. Sit down with your wife, your husband, your family, whatever it is, and figure it out and kind of nail it down, and at least have like a top 5. If I have my choice, I want to be here. If not there, here. If not here, there. And nail it down now, so that you know where you're gonna go. You need to do some research, though. You need to make sure that the areas that you're wanting to move to is going to work for your lifestyle. You would be surprised of how many places across the country have ordinances and building codes and stuff that just don't allow you to live that way. I personally talked to someone a few years ago that they bought a piece of land, and I cannot remember exactly where it was. I want to say it was up in the Pacific Northwest somewhere. And so they bought this piece of land with a lot of forest on it, and their idea was to go in and cut the wood down and build a log cabin. No, it wasn't a log cabin. They were going to get one of those sawmills and mill their own lumber and build their own house. And in fact, there was some kind of building code that you could not build with lumber that didn't come from some kind of certified or licensed lumber yard. So it was actually illegal where he was at to mill his own lumber to build his own house. And here they bought all this land to do that, and it throws a big wrench in it. So make sure where you're at that the codes and the ordinances will work with the lifestyle that you're wanting. And then also make sure that the where you live, that it will actually support your lifestyle. Is there the rainfall enough? If weather patterns do change because of grand solar minimum, will where you live be the middle of the Arctic all of a sudden? You can find land really, really cheap in Arizona. You can find land down there for $100 an acre in some places. But you're way out in the desert and you have no access to water whatsoever. And how can you homestead that way? Some people do, not saying you can't, but you need to think about these things. Do you have access to water? Is the rainy season going to work? The land that you're looking at, can you even grow a garden on it? What kind of wildlife is around there? Can you hunt? Can you do all these things? What about the people around you? Is everyone around you living in $500,000 homes? Then, maybe that's not the best place for you to build your little cabin. But if you drive around in that neighborhood or in that area out in the country and you see other people doing little homesteads, having chickens and goats and maybe little cabins, then it could be an indicator that may be a good place to settle down with this kind of lifestyle. Realize that there's going to be sacrifices. There just is. You can't make the transition. If you're living in a big city, in a big city lifestyle, big modern lifestyle with all the modern conveniences, and then want to come out here and live this lifestyle, there's going to be changes. There just is, period. There's no way around it. And you need to understand that there's going to be sacrifices. There's going to be changes to this lifestyle. Even if you already live in the country, you're just the regular people that live in the country, but yet now you want to go from living in the country to living a very self-sufficient lifestyle, homesteading, where you're really kind of moving towards, really living off the land. There's going to be sacrifices. There's going to be changes that needs to be made, and you need to make a list of things that you're willing to change. There's some things that you just may not be willing to change. You may not be willing to sacrifice. You need to figure that out now before you get into it. There's so many people, if you read back in history of the original homesteading movement where they were giving away land as long as you lived on it so many years, the vast majority of people that did that didn't make it. Doesn't mean that they necessarily died. They just gave up. It was just, they realized it was too hard. You know what? It still happens today. The vast majority of people that move out in these areas like where I'm at and other areas of the country that are like this, that are going to try to do it, I can't tell you how many people just in the last few years here in the Ozarks that I have met that decided they wanted a homestead, They moved down from the big city, bought a little piece of land, and they lasted a year, maybe 2 years, and then they gave up because it was just too hard. They had too many sacrifices, too many changes, and they just weren't prepared. You need to figure that out now before you get out here, and then waste all that time and money doing something you just can't do, or you're not willing to go that distance. Food, food, food. Talk about it all the time. And I'm hoping that eventually, if I talk about it enough, that everyone will kind of get it through their head. It's extremely important. And when I say food, I'm including water for this instance at least. You can't survive without it, right? You can't survive without food, water, and shelter. That's your three main things. I mean, there's other important things, but food, water, shelter, folks. Learn how to grow it. Learn how to raise it. Learn how to forage for it. Learn how to hunt for it, and learn how to preserve it. These are things that you need to start learning now. If you're living in an apartment somewhere and you're planning on your move out into the country, you need to start on it now. If nothing else, read. Get some books and read. Watch some videos on how to do it. Start, little seedlings and potted plants in your house, in your apartment, on your balcony, in your backyard, whatever it is. The point is that you need to put a lot of focus on food, whether you're growing it or raising it or whatever. Excuse me. And you need to learn not just how to produce it, but how to preserve it. Because, even if you grow a really nice garden, it's not going to be there in the wintertime. So you need to learn how to preserve the food that you're growing so that you can eat it throughout the year. Extremely important. Learn to do things simpler. Just learn old-fashioned skills. I talk about this a lot too. And also have the tools to do those old-fashioned skills. My wife and I, we were talking about this the other day. And, for instance, as an example, when you, a little handheld mixer, the kind that you plug in, electric, and you mix in cookie dough or whatever it is, you can get those manually, the old-fashioned ways. For you guys drilling a hole in a piece of wood to put a screw and a nail in it, you can buy a handheld one, the old-fashioned kind. It's good to have these old-fashioned things and to learn how to do things an old-fashioned way, because it can help you become less dependent on a system. You may not need the electricity or gasoline if you can learn to do it an old way. It's a lot of times it's more sustainable in the long run to do things old and simple. And along with that is build a library. If you're not doing it now, you need to do it. Don't be so dependent upon the internet, upon PDF files. I don't care if you even put it on a little stick. If you can't access a computer or something, it's not going to be any good. I love just real books, okay? Just ones that you put in your hand. I love the smell, the holding it, reading it, and start building your prepper, homestead, sustainable library, and all the things that you need. And a lot of it you can pick up at secondhand stores, thrift stores, that kind of stuff. But start doing that because you're going to need it for gardening, for animals, for fixing things, building things, growing things, surviving, medical, all that kind of stuff. You need it. Take the time to design your homestead, your property. You can come up with this ahead of time of what you would like, and then once you pick out your place, whether there's a house there or not, design the areas of where you want it to go. Don't just go out there and start throwing things around, chicken coops and garden plots and all this kind of stuff. Come up with a design to it, and try to make it as sustainable as possible. This will help you in the long run. Chicken coop, chicken litter to go on the compost pile to the garden, and so we've kind of got it all lined up. However you want to do it, put some planning ahead of time, so that you can create a natural balance on your homestead, and also relieve you from some work if you plan ahead of time. Last two, build connections with others. This is extremely important. The connections online are important, but I'm talking about real-world connections. The vast majority of real-world connections that I have made, especially in my area, I didn't start out as online. These are just people that I met, whether it's neighbors or down at the farm store or at the hardware store, and just talking to someone. Met someone yesterday, a lady that is basically doing the same thing, and she's Her big focus is orchards and grapevines and plum trees and stuff like that. And we talked forever, my wife and I and this lady, about all the stuff that she's been planning and that she's been doing. She's been working on this for a few years. And so build connections with people, especially face-to-face connections around you. It will come in handy in the long run, trust me. And then to develop alternate ways to communicate. You know, I know this sounds more on the prepper side of it, but it also helps on the sustainable, self-sufficient homestead side of it too. You need to have ways to communicate with others. You know, I do not support necessarily this lone wolf mentality, whether it's a lone wolf prepper or your lone wolf homestead. You need to have connections with others, and you need to be able to communicate. Ham radio is a great way to communicate with people. Writing letters is a way to communicate. Creating some type of, you know, you may eventually need to create a network with others around you, not just a radio network, but also a network to hand deliver type stuff, you know, mails and transfer things around, because of the system around you may fail, or it may no longer become secure to do so. So work on ways to communicate and build connections. I know those were 2 points today, but those really go hand in hand, and they're very important. And if you start doing all these things now and working towards it, on your little homestead, your little piece of heaven, wherever it is, or wherever you're wanting to go, you can develop self-sustainability, self-sufficiency, to where your life is more in your own hands than it is in the system around you, in the state around you, in the government around you. And the more that you can do that, I mean, there's hardly a more rebellious act than to not be dependent upon the system around you, and you can really kind of up that level of preparedness when you do so. All right, folks, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.